friend. And I can't wait to get on the road again. On the road again. Going places that I've never been. Seeing things that I may never see again. And I can't wait to get on the road. Everybody sing right here. On the road again. Like a band of gypsies, we go down the highway. We're the best of friends. Insisting that the world keep turning our way. Our way. Just can't wait to get on the road again. The life I love is making music with my friends. And I can't wait to get on the road again. Road again. Just can't wait to get on the road again. The life I love is making music with my friends. And I can't wait to get on the road again. I can't wait to get on the road again.
We're going to do a song by somebody we have loved forever and ever, and he just went on to heaven recently. We're going to do something by Greg Almond.
From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Bostonred Network. The title of our episode, Down on the Farm 2017, on the 26th of November 2017. We are falling back here on a national organization called the National Farmers Coalition. We located them at Farm Aid. That is an organization started by Mr. Willie Nelson, and Willie is still doing it 33 years later. I can recall working with Farm Aid and with the Farmers Fight back in the 80s. That many people were involved in, the corporate campaign that was involving a meatpacking local called P9 in Minnesota. Jesse Jackson was there in Operation Push, and Jesse Jackson has been integrally involved in the struggles of farmers across the nation. One of the things we have to understand is when we dealing with social justice, civil rights, human rights, etc., we have to deal with the whole package, as the late great Jerry Pippin would say. And farming, rural America is part of it. We're cognizant of the fact that many people in rural America, from a very long time ago, as Jesse said once at Operation Push, farmers down in Des Moines, Iowa, drove into the capital there, it's the capital of Iowa, with Reagan stickers on their tractors. And after Reagan appeared in office, then all of a sudden farmers started to lose their land. The corporate types were consolidating the land when farmers could not pay back the loans. Farmers at one time, we'll go back a little bit on farming, back over 30 years into the 70s, farmers were encouraged to produce more and more, buy newer and newer machinery. Loans were out there. In fact, farmers went into it in a technological way. They were getting Apple IIs, I remember that. Farming became much more of a technical operation. Tractors had stereo on them, air conditioning, etc. No more of this old riding in the open, collecting dust and whatever the bugs from the fields of Iowa. with the corn picking machines, automated machines. I suppose now they're going more and more into robotics, but still they are out there. But the Farmers Coalition is very interesting. I'll read a little bit of this, and we'll append the survey that they took. Agriculture in the U.S. is at a breaking point. Farmers over the age of 65 now outnumber farmers under 25 by a margin of 6-1. U.S. farmland is overwhelmingly concentrated in the hands of older farmers. Nearly 2/3 of farmland is currently managed by someone over 55. The National Agriculture Statistics Service estimates that the next 5 years, the lifespan of the next farm bill, nearly 100 million acres of, I'm not sure what is about 120 hectares anyway, of farmland are expected to change ownership, and we need a new farmers. Unfortunately, many young Americans are stepping up and launching new farm enterprises or businesses. For only the second time in the last century, the 2012 Census of Agriculture registered an increase over the previous census. They take these censuses every 10 years, incidentally. The number of farmers under 35. These young farmers are entrepreneurial and tough, but they are finding that talent and hard work alone may not equate to farming success. There are many structural barriers standing in their way. We'll find out some of this report. The stakes have never been higher, given the scale and emergency of the need for more farmers. The upcoming farm bill. Now, this is interesting. This farm bill has been played around, beginning of a national priority and opportunity we can't miss. Now, the Young Farmers Survey will go to it. In our report, Building a Future with Farmers, is the results and recommendations from the National Farm Service Survey. We present responses from past, current, and aspiring farmers under 40 years old and highlight the key challenges. Let me go to that now. This is a survey in November, so it's fresh off the press, so to speak. At least fresh off the digital page. The Young Farmers Coalition, November 17, Building a Future with Farmers 2, results and recommendations from the National Young Farmers Survey. Thanks to our review committee for their time and expertise they offer to this project. Mr. Hupsner, National Sustainable Agricultural Coalition, Ann Johnson, Center for Rural Affairs, Gary Mattson, Farm Credit, Dr. Kathleen, and these are the authors actually of it. Merrigan of the George Washington University, that's in Washington, D.C. Amit Steele, Real Food Challenge, Andrew Williams, Deep South Food Coalition. And the authors of this study, again, Dr. Merrigan of George Washington University, Culligan of Harari Culligan, and Sarah Pagan, also George Washington University. It was made possible with support. I won't name all of these. Joyce and Urban Goldman Family Foundation, Lillian Goldman Charitable Trust, the Farm Aid, and Russell Berry Foundation, and the Woodstock Foundation. Some of the New World Foundation also made this possible, did the funding for these studies. We're grateful to many people who made this survey possible. We thank Applegate, the Janelle Foundation, and so forth and so on. Neil Newman Foundation, New Visions Foundation, etc. here. We won't go into all of these. We'll append this where you can actually read these. Let's see if we can get my point of pointing here. Special thanks to our 94 partner organizations for helping sharing the survey with their networks. and we at WBRN and the Bostonred Network are happy to share it also in the broadcast. And the Alabama Sustainable Agriculture Network, we just named some of these. The Boulder County Farmers Market, the California Alliance for Family Farmers, some of the few here. We obviously won't go for all 94. Holistic Management, New Mexico Farmers Marketing Association, Wilmette Farms and Food Coalition, and so forth. The content, the executive survey, Will and Lisa will go through it. Somebody here's picking tomatoes. And the Young Farmers Coalition represents, mobilizes and engages young farmers and ranchers to ensure their success. We track the most critical structural and economic issues that prevent motivated young people from succeeding in farming and ranching. In January and February 2017, we conducted our survey. This report from 3,517 past, current, and aspiring farmers under 40 years of age across the U.S. Aging farm population, farmers over 65 now outnumber farmers under 35, and we went over that. Hope, despite it all, young farmers face serious obstacles to launching and growing their farm businesses. They can't afford farmland. Student debt is compromising their ability to capitalize their businesses. Adequate labor and support staff are difficult to recruit. Health insurance is unaffordable. Federal and state programs are underserving their needs, and many young farmers are not accessing the programs designed to help. Our survey illustrates a challenging economic picture for young farmers. 61% of individual respondents reported needing another job to make ends meet. That has happened for much in farm country. Usually one person is farming, and if they're children, they're farming. And it's normally the mother or perhaps even the father work outside. Many people work in factories and what have you and farm part-time. Robert Johansson, the chief USDA's chief economist, young farmers and those who rent most of their land tend to be far more in debt relative to their assets. In 2015, farmers under 35 had an average debt-to-asset ratio of 28% compared to 16% for age 45 to 55, and only 11.5% 55 to 64. Now that has changed somewhat when we were dealing with the farm crisis, and these are some of the things they're trying to access here. Access to land, secured land tenure is a fundamental component of viable farm business. Land access is a top challenge. In this survey, 33% of the respondents are current farmers cited land access as a significant challenge, with 17% calling it the most significant challenge. Both for the first generation, multi-generation farmers cite as a challenge. Obviously, it was when we became involved in the struggle. Student loans. 29% call their student loan debt a significant challenge, with 10% citing it is the most significant challenge. Labor, the shortfall of skilled farm labor, no doubt 30% of respondents cited labor as a significant challenge, with 10% citing it as a big challenge. Health insurance, no doubt, basically unaffordable. Nearly half the respondents cited health care as a significant challenge there. With the help of 94 partner organizations, a survey of 4,746 total respondents. This is in January and February. After limiting the sample of respondents onto 30 hours sampling, a total of 3,517. Women, 60% of respondents were women, not from farm families, 75%. 69% highly educated, degrees beyond high school, most likely to be farmers of color, are indigenous farmers than the national average. Portion of people of color, indigenous farmers in our survey was roughly twice that of the 2012 survey. We work with African farmers in their struggle against the USDA, and they finally got a settlement out of them. Growing vegetables and livestock on diversified farms. 72% of surveyed respondents grew vegetables. 81% of respondents said they grew 2 or more types of products, while 25% said livestock made up the highest percentage of their sales. Many more are using animals to diversify their farms, selling directly to consumers. That is more of a sales model for many people. 75% of farmers describe their practices as sustainable. 63% describe their practices as organic. A lot of organic farmers out there. Land access is number one challenge for young farmers. Affordable care is the most helpful program. That Obamacare, no doubt. Young farmers surveyed are highly educated. Severe and unpredictable weather is common. Climate change is 66% of young farmers had experienced unpredictable weather. More severe storms increase pest pressure, increase uncertainties in water supply, and increase in rare diseases. Lawmakers can help on the federal level increase funding for agricultural conservation easement programs and give top priority to easement that protect the affordability of family farms. Raise the loan limit for a family service agency, direct farm ownership loans, and increase funding in those loans. Incentivize farmland transition and leasing to young farmers through the tax code. Oops, shot by it here a little too fast. Address racial inequality, establish a tax-free savings account for farmers, offer loan approval for beginning farmers, provide training to work with beginning and diversified organic farmers more effectively. We have in this out in the West, cannabis farmers are coming in, but very expensive for people to get in it in areas that have the greenhouse type things going on. But out in the land, Northern California, you recall during the Great Fire of 2017, a lot of the crops were destroyed, and there's no insurance against that. Allow access to driver's license for undocumented workers. Undocumented workers play an important part in farming. About the National Young Farmers Survey in 2011, Young Farmers Coalition conducted the first ever national survey of youth and beginning farmers. In our report, we introduced the country to a new generation of farmers who, because of their predominantly non-farm background and economic trends of U.S. agriculture, we're facing a unique set of challenges, no doubt about that. For example, to address the lack of access to credit among young farmers, our recommendation called upon the USDA micro-lending programs. Micro-lending is very important. It's been tried in a lot of emerging markets with mixed results. In 2013, USDA Farm Service created a direct farmer operating microloans to specifically address young and beginning farmers, including a faster application process. In the 2014 Farm Bill, the microloan program was expanded and made permanent. Over 28,000 loans have been administrated. In the report presented findings of this report, the second survey, not sure if they're going to, with the goal of helping 25,000 young people enter into viable farm careers by 2022. Since it launched, 37 farm-led chapters across the country have built grassroots-based for 120,000. We help farmers become leaders in their community. This is grassroots organizing, no doubt about that. This is a picture of their staff here, D.C. fly-in, okay. Historical context, agriculture in the U.S. is at a breaking point. We talked about that, and we won't repeat that. In the 1930s, farms in the U.S. Continued a steady trajectory of bigger and fewer, even as the amount of land in cultivation has changed. Little farms have been consolidated into larger farms. 1935, the average size of a farm was 155 acres. In 2016, 440 acres. Nearly 70% of all farms, farmland is contained in 8% of farm operations that are larger than 1,000 acres. Yeah, I've heard that before. Largely as a result of 1980 farm crisis. We were talking about that. Generations of rural youth have been discouraged from entering careers. I was talking to a fellow named Brown. He was telling me about that. From Iowa, he left Iowa and moved to California. And only 6% of all U.S. prime farm operators are under 35 years of age. The average is 58.3. Racial inequality, people of color, indigenous people, namely historical dispossession and continual discrimination had played into the disappearance of family farm and ranches, as well as underrepresentation amongst farm operations. Indigenous, Native Americans, Aboriginals, whatever you want to call them, and that is not in a negative sense. Farmers have faced displacement and regulation since before the founding of the country, and in centuries since. Land and food policies, as well as cultural conflict, have contributed to this legacy of marginalization. In the last 20th century, African American farmers and African American land ownership has also steeply declined. In 1920, 1 in 7 African American families, over 225,000 nationwide together, they owned 16 million acres of farmland. By 1999, the number had fallen to 18,000, owning just 2.3 million. Today, 2% of families are African Americans, and they own only a quarter of the land they once held. The loss of these farmers has been attributed in large part to discriminatory practices by the USDA. We were talking about that. Latinos make up a vast majority of farm workers, but very few are able to start their own farming occupations. But according to USDA Department of Labor, of the U.S. Department of Labor, nearly half of all farm workers do not have a work authorization. No doubt. Documented discrimination in the 1999 USDA settlement, historic Pitford versus Glickman, which awarded African American farmers $2 billion to make amends for discriminatory practices. This was followed by an additional lawsuit by indigenous farmers and Latino farmers, which was similarly there. The Good Old Boys Network has an unwritten system. If you walk in FSA, you were an African American, the first thing they did was to close the book. No doubt. So they had little ways of keeping you out. Methodology, back to the team from George Washington University, Dr. Merrigan. To increase participation in the survey outside of existing network, they partnered with 94 different organizations. We named some of those, and we won't go into the survey of participants here because there are many. Participants age 40 or younger living in the U.S. 74% are 79, are currently farmers. Have left 15%. Aspiring farmers 5 do not wish to farm 1% here. A lot of statistics loaded operation here. Geographical distribution. How the survey respondents turned out. 33.5% were in the West. In the Midwest, 22.20%. That's 1,012, 1,125 in all of the West. The South and Mid-Atlantic, 23.7%, 1,138. And in the Northeast, very surprising here, 30%, 0.48%, 1,381. Somehow they put this together. States were sorted as in the West. They had Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, New Mexico, Nevada, Oregon, Utah, and Washington. And Wyoming in the Midwest, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, North and South, North Dakota, South Dakota. They put Ohio in there also in the Southeast. Mid-Atlantic, Alabama, Arkansas, Delaware, Florida, very large agricultural states, South Carolina, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia. In the Northeast, Connecticut, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Vermont. In the age here, the average 29.6, the medium 30, and the youngest 11. The gender here, most farmers in the U.S. are older men, with women representing only 14%. In particular, in the 2012 census revealed 8% decrease from the previous census. That was 2012, incidentally. And 60% of survey respondents were female. That has been changing. 37% are leading the future in farming. More and more young women are going into it. The distribution of respondents, 87% were Europeans, more in one race. Latinos at 2%, others African Americans at 2%, Asians, Native Hawaiians, and other Pacific Islanders at 1%. Very, very low there. Race, more than 10% of our survey were people of color and indigenous farmers, including 5% who selected more than one race, 2% Latino. We already went over that one. I still farm there. Did you grow up on a farm? Yes, 13%, no, 75%. They're new to the issue. 47% of participants were farm owners, 14% were managers, 15% were workers, 9% also work with someone else on the farm. Acreage, the average size of these new farms are 276.2 acres, a little more than half the national average of 434. I understand talking once to a farmer in I think Wisconsin, but basically you have to have 1,000 acres to get anything done. Comparative acreage, the 434. Young farmers are building diversified farms. We already talked about this, livestock, etc. Young farmers here, a lot of young farmers are organic farmers. Flowers, they're into flowers, 72% in the vegetables, livestock, total combination, 25% flowers, poultry, let's see, 35%, fruits and nuts, 33%, hogs, the infamous pig has arisen, 22%, and 20% for beef cattle, as they call them. Dairy cows, sheep, and goats, 15% there. Honey, a large percentage. I was noticing today at the market, honey is getting to be very expensive. 15% there. Sheep, 13%. Small grains, 11% of the livestock. Forest products, 8%. We won't spend any time on the education here. But of the young farmers, 55% have bachelor's degrees, 14% masters. Doctors are equivalent, 1%. Less than high school, 3% high school there. It doesn't really matter that much. You just have to know farming. Sustainable, 5% organic, 83%, holistic management 31%, integrated pest management 29%, permaculture 23%, conventional 16%, and biodynamic, biodynamic, 16% there. Certified organic farmers, I once did some work for an organic broker, grain broker, that is. USDA certified, 17%. They now, in those days they didn't, it was private organization. Certified nationally grown, 3%. Animal welfare approved, 3%, 1%. Grass fed, that's by the USDA. Certified humane, 1%. Food justice certified, 0%. Well, here we go. Young farmers work with land trusts. Now, land trusts are a little bit different here. Third generation Georgia farmer can't get credit because of bad student loan. Well, yeah, no doubt about that. Student loan debt, excuse me. Labor, we've already talked about labor, various shortfalls in labor. California veteran benefits from state-funded training programs to start a career in aquaponics. I'm not sure what that, I guess. It was in the middle of, major drought, okay. We want to find out the owner of farm. Being accepted the internship, they're returning. I completed a veteran internship in outdoor robos aquaponics. I don't know, no idea. The seed money to start the farm. Today, the urban garden focuses on producing microgreens that are sold at free farmers markets in Venice and Beverly Hills, of all places. Okay. You see more and more of these kinds of farms out there. Health insurance won't get into that one. Barriers to USDA programs, more programs online than not online. The micro program, I'm kind of interested in that. Raises Black Angus. This is Lee Brooks. He's in Linden, Alabama. He grew up in a farming community, now farms his family's 60 acres. Lee's day job is trucking, hauls wood. That's not unusual. He learned of the FDA's microloan program through some guy named Williams with the Deep South Food Alliance. He was approved for $35,000 that helped him acquire 18 Black Angus cows. A year later, he was approved for $15,000. The process was fairly smooth. His USDA loan officer relayed what information he needed to provide, and Tuskegee Cooperative, that's the Tuskegee College, it used to be the Tuskegee Institute, complete a farm visit and received his funds a month later. Now that is about as good as you get there with the USDA. Climate challenge, we don't need to talk about that. We know Harvey and climate change plays a very important role there. Tax code, state barriers, established loan programs. We won't go into that. We'll append this, and it has a nice survey here. So this is their national survey. The Young Farmers Agenda will also append it, and we have some music when we leave from Farm Aid 2017 that was in Pennsylvania. And also we won't spend time running out here. The elimination of the GIMPSA program, and that is by this Purdue, following on the heels of his withdrawal of the grain inspection program, packing and stockyard administration. I guess that's it. Fair trade protection rules, evidently that has hurt turkey farmers. on November the 14th. This Purdue character, Packers in Stockyards program, formerly part of GIPSA and the Warehouse Act, functionally former part of the Farm Services, will be transferred to the Agriculture Marketing Service and included in the Fair Trade Practices area. Purdue's plan to eliminate GIPSA was announced in September. The Organization for Competitive Markets urged the Secretary to reconsider the program. Now, we were stunned that the Secretary continues to erode farmers and ranchers' anti-monopoly protections, as this action further weakens the marketplace safeguards. It's the same thing they're trying to do with the Consumer Protection Agency. And America's farmers and ranchers can't take much more abuse by large multinationals, foreign corporations, and nor the facilitation of the abuse by the department that Abraham Lincoln once called the People's Department. This Department of Agriculture. No longer is it the People's Department. They have moved on, and as we leave, the Native American community preserves its food. This is in California. The tribe. It's one of these tribes was decertified and later recertified in California. There are a lot of them, and they are doing a fish, especially with the tribe Natural Resources Department. Many Americans settled down into their version of Thanksgiving dinner, and these Aboriginal or Native peoples are following their fish gathering and tradition, smoking of salmon there, and changes in the food system there began in 1853 as the California Gold Rush brought a mass incursion of European settlers making their way for the newcomers and addressing what they call the Indian problem. California paid a bounty for Indian scalps, and to provide a much more lucrative, to be more lucrative than a panning of gold. Didn't know that one. The first session of the California State Legislature passed an act of government and protection of Indians in 1850, which legalized removal of natives from their land and separated native families. Same thing. The Prime Minister Trudeau apologized for doing in Canada in 1910, like many California tribes. The Tuowas population had dwindled from more than 10,000 to just 504. They weren't fully represented after the 14th Amendment to 1937. So that is some of the things that happened to the Tolowa, T-O-L-O-W-A, Loa, Tolowa tribe. And this is one of many stories here of this particular nation and some of their traditional things, cooking of the fish and smoking of the fish, etc. We'll put one of the pictures up here looking forward to traditional feasts while watching deer steaks roast and on skews next to salmon. That's kind of interesting there how they do this, but that is their holiday thing. Even smelt, they're taking it, rolling it, looks like in dough here. So some of the presses are still out there. Rolling, this is Indian bread. Had that before. One of the little stories we put. And as we go to the music here, let me very quickly do the sport. Incidentally, number one, Alabama was defeated today by Auburn, the so-called country people in Alabama. I would imagine Judge Roy Moore has his alma mater was not pleased. So they will not be number one now. Here's how Alabama lost. It will affect the playoffs. All right. We'll have to look at this. The all quote-unquote important college playoffs here. As we've been calling Week 13 power rating. Clemson earns a return to the top spot, so to speak. There's a headline. This is from ESPN, incidentally, from henceforth. I come up, and let's look at this. The Alabama Crimson Tide, how loss will impact the playoffs. College football playoffs committee will release the fifth of its 6 rankings, and there will be a major turnover with a loss at number 1 and a number 2 of Miami. I didn't know they lost. And expect a strong debate about Clemson and Oklahoma for the number 1 spot, and undefeated Wisconsin.
Together,
and Auburn should be there also. So.
And put our holiday budgets to work. We find new...
I have to kill the sound here. So this is very interesting here, where these characters will end up. I'm not certain here. The power ratings, the Iron Bowl, as they call it, win sets up a mad dash to the finish line with no clear leader. No doubt. So we got some information here. Incidentally, we'll have the Monday morning quarterback on Monday morning. But this, we just had to... We couldn't help ourselves, no worries. With Bama, finally the real debate over the top spot for college football. After 2 of the 3 remaining Power 5 unbeatens, Alabama and Miami suffered a loss. And it could be good news for Oklahoma and company.
And put our holiday budget.
And once again, we'll see. Clemson, a team that, other than Friday night's upset of in upstate New York, has looked great on the road. Get back to number 1. Oklahoma's win. Ohio State, Oklahoma State, they all stack up. So they'll all be out here trying to get what they can. Let me just get to these scores first, then we'll get back to the NBA. This is college basketball from Saturday. And it'll take us a minute to get to it here. We have to doctor it a little bit. This will be very interesting to see who comes out of this. I'll have to ask Paula about that. Nonetheless, we'll move to Saturday. Number 1, Bama. They were beaten by number 6, Auburn, 26-14. Clemson, 34-10 over South Carolina. That's pretty much expected there. Yeah, nasty. Number 4, Oklahoma, 59-31 over West Virginia. Wisconsin shut out Minnesota, 31-zip. They were number 5. Georgia and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech didn't have very good luck. 37-7. Notre Dame and Stanford. Stanford 38-20 there. Ohio State and Michigan. Ohio State 31. Ohio State's number 9. They're not going anywhere. Number 10, Penn State. They ran the score up to a basketball store. 66-3. Washington State and Washington 41-14. Washington in Seattle. Michigan State and Rutgers. Poor Rutgers. I tell Ellie about this. 40-7. Michigan State. Texas A&M. LSU 45-12. Terry Bradshaw would be happy. LSU. Anyway, Kansas and Oklahoma State. Another basketball score. 58-17. State over Kansas. East Carolina and Memphis. 70-13. They should just stop games like that. Northwestern 42-7 over the Illini. And finally, Boise State was beaten by Fresno State 28-17 on to the NBA Well, we can get this. So the college football situation is now in flux, at least the playoff situation. Who will be number one? Oh, it'll be interesting. Monday night we'll have something to talk about, I suppose. The Spurs were at the Hornets. Spurs 106-86 over the Hornets. The Magic were in Philadelphia. 76ers 130-111. The Trailblazers were in D.C. Close game there. 108. Trailblazers 105. The Wizards, the Raptors were at the Hawks in Atlanta. Raptors 112-78. The Celtics were at the Pacers in Indiana. 108 for the Celts and 98 for the Pacers. The Knickerbockers were in Houston. Rockets 117-102. And the Pelicans were in the Bay. Warriors 110-95. The Bucks were at the Jazz 121-108. And the Clippers were at the Kings in Sacramento. Let's see, 97-95 was the score there. That does it for sports. Again, number one, Bama got the gate, so to speak. Anyway, this will do it for us. We'll see you on the Monday Morning Quarterback. Incidentally, this weekend, we have the Perfecto, as they say. Numbers Man, that's our macroeconomics program. It is there. You can find it on most of these networks, iHeart, Spreaker, Stitcher, YouTube, RSS feed, etc. The same goes for the open source report. That's our technical presentation. We finally have one out talking about the Linux kernel is 4.14.2.1. We're running 1. So that is out, and let's see what else is rolling around there. Anyway, those are all out there, and we had a week that was on Saturday morning. Tune into that. So programs all over the place. We're all there. The episode, Down on the Farm, 2017, revolving around the next generation of farmers and also the diversity in farming, sustainable farming. All this goes in with open source. As incidentally, open source hardware used down on the farms. We didn't get to it. We'll have to come back a few months later and work more on the program as we've been doing with the Postal Service. We have a new Postal Service coming up somewhere in the next month or so. I'm not sure we'll get it in December, but in December we want to have a live call-in program. We were planning to do one on Jerry Pippin's 77th birthday on the 25th, but we didn't get it in. Sometimes you get things in, sometimes you don't, particularly when you're doing a live programming. Spent some time on BR on the World with the developments in Zimbabwe. The President, Mr. Robert Mugabe, has been deposed, as they say, for one of these hybrid-type coup operations. And Emerson Mnangagwa has been installed, quite literally. And behind him comes the IMF, the World Bank, and a cast of characters, just too numerous for us to talk about. Good day.
On the road again. Just can't wait to get on the road again. The life I love is making music with my friends. And I can't. Midnight ride.
I don't own the clothes I'm wearing. This old road goes on forever, and I got one more silver dollar.
midnight rambler. Yes, me know. And I'll catch the midnight rambler.
Love y'all. We got some news to make. Jerry Reed is getting inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame this year. Jerry Reed was one of the best guitar players that ever learned how to play one. Even Chet Atkins said that. He was amazing. We're going to do you some Jerry Reed before we go here real quick. Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking. We're gonna do the best we got a long way to go, and a short time to get there. I'm eastbound as a watch old bandit run. Keep your foot hard on the pedal, so never mind them brakes. Let it all hang out, cause we got a run to make. The boys are thirsty in Atlanta, there's beer in Texarkana. We'll bring it back no matter what it takes. Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking. What we gonna do with this? It can't be done. We got a long way to go and a short time to get there. I'm eastbound as watch old bandit run. He's got his ears on, he's not on your trail, he ain't gonna arrest you in jail. You got to dodge, you got to duck, you got to keep that big rig trucking. Keep that hammer down, son, give it hell. Eastbound and down, dude, load it up and truck it. But we're gonna do what they say can't be done. We got a long way to go, and a short time to get there. I'm eastbound, just watch old bandit run. Coming up, Margot Price is coming up. Love you, brother. Support your local farmer. Buy local.
Shotgun shack. Get a little behind and have a man come and take it back. They're all breathing down my neck, waiting for me to fall. Well, if it wasn't for bad luck, I wouldn't have no luck at all. Let it burn, burn, baby, let it burn. I can't wait to see them all when they ain't got nowhere to turn. I watch the flames light up the sky, blow them a kiss
There's a new one, it's called Weakness.
Sometimes I'm genuine, sometimes I'm James Dean. Sometimes I'm on the bend and I'm worse than me. My right hand never knows what my left one's gonna do, but I never meant to cause the harm that I have done to you. Sometimes I drink Beaujolais, sometimes I drink gin. Sometimes the whiskey does me right, sometimes it does me in. But you've seen all my dark shades, everything I've been. Still I can hurt myself much more than anyone else can. I'm worried for no reason, I'm worried and I'm blue. There's no better cure for it, being next to you. I can't hide what I am, yes it's plain to see. Sometimes my weakness is stronger than me. Sometimes my weakness is stronger than me. Sometimes I live in a penthouse, sometimes I live in a shack. Sometimes I fall off the wagon like a train running off the track. But I reckon that I jump back on it, get this monkey off my back. Or I wind up back in prison to give myself another heart attack. I'm worried for no reason, I'm worried and I'm blue. There's no better cure for it, being next to you. Oh, I can't hide what I am, yes it's plain to see. Sometimes my weakness is stronger than me. Sometimes my weakness is stronger than me.
Well, the boys and I, Lucas and Micah, got together and with Buddy Cannon and cut a bunch of good country songs. And I can't wait for it to come out. It's, I think, October 20th is the release date. Oh, yeah. Well, this is a song I've been doing for years, an old Hank Williams classic, and I got the boys to do it with me, and I think it turned out pretty good.